What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 predictions. The Minnesota Golden Gophers are up next. Let's take a look at some of the other predictions for Minnesota. You can see the FPI has them at 6.5 and 5.7, about a 20% chance to win the Big Ten West. And if it's not Wisconsin, maybe it is Minnesota. Minnesota, I think, is definitely right there in that cluster of teams. I've said before, I think Wisconsin is the front runner this year, but a lot of question marks there with a lot of new faces, so we don't know for sure about Wisconsin. But yeah, Minnesota definitely, I think, has a shot if Wisconsin does not win that division. Athlon has them at 7 and 5. The over/under, I've seen it at 6.5, 7, and 7.5. You like the over on that 6.5. 7.5 is a tough one to really go either way on that. But this has been, again, a very consistent program under PJ Fleck. Won 9 games last year, and they go out and do it every year. They have a culture established there. This program has been built. No, they're not going to playoff or the playoffs or anything like that, but they've established themselves as a very solid, a good program. And you look at this team this year, offensively, I think they're going to be pretty good as long as they get good quarterback play around the quarterback. They have plenty of weapons at wide receiver, tight end, another good stable of running backs. Offensive line looks to be pretty good. Defensively, I think the defensive line will be strong for them. I do have some concerns about the back seven. So linebackers and the secondary, especially the cornerback position, especially depth at corner. When you evaluate this roster, that's something that does concern me. So if they go up against a really good passing team, you have to wonder, could that possibly cost them? Again, if you get going back to the defensive line, if you get pressure on the opposing quarterback, you don't have to guard those receivers as long. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, I wouldn't doubt this team. They've built a program. They know how to develop players. And so sometimes you don't see a lot of returning production, a lot of talent when you look at the recruiting rankings, but they just go out there and get it done. And there are several programs like that. Minnesota definitely one of them. They'll start off the season on Thursday night at home against Nebraska. Should be a good one here. You look at the total team talent. Nebraska actually probably has a slight advantage there, but they're kind of in rebuild mode. New head coach, of course, and Minnesota's got that established program. I think PJ Fleck wins the coaching battle here, and I think Minnesota's able to get the win. Plus, they're playing at home, so that bodes well for them as well. So I've got them starting off 2-0, beating Nebraska and Eastern Michigan. Then they go on the road to face North Carolina, and I'll circle back to what I just talked about a second ago. Secondary. Can Minnesota stop these receivers for North Carolina? I think they're going to struggle there, but on the flip side, I think North Carolina may struggle to slow down this Minnesota offense, especially their run game. And this is one of those games where Minnesota is probably going to try to run the ball, chew up a lot of clock, keep the North Carolina offense on the sidelines, and it might work. And I think there's a very real shot that Minnesota could win this game. But I think the game comes down to the fourth quarter, the passing attack for North Carolina. They make the plays, plus they have home field advantage. That's enough for me to go with the Tar Heels. But don't be shocked if Minnesota wins that game. Next up, you got Northwestern on September 23rd on the road. I know I repeat myself a lot in these videos because I have to talk about the same teams over and over and over when you do predictions for all the teams. But yeah, Northwestern, a team that we just don't know what we're going to get. They surprise some years, they disappoint some years, and this year I think they're kind of in the middle. I don't think they're going to be a contender in the Big Ten West, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were last year. But still, Minnesota, I think, is the better team. Even on the road, I've got Minnesota getting this win and getting to 3-1. They play Louisiana after that. They weren't as good last year without Billy Napier. I don't know that they're going to be able to go into Minnesota and win. I think Minnesota is the better team here. So I think they take care of business in that game and get to 4-1. Then they'll play Michigan on October the 7th. Should be a good matchup here. Two teams that are going to want to run the football. Probably a lower scoring game. And by lower scoring, I mean something like 28-17, some kind of in that range. But Minnesota wins this game. Michigan wins this game. Don't want to get you too excited there, Minnesota fans. But yeah, Michigan wins this game. They're the better team. A lot more talent, a lot more depth. And they're playing at home. Well, no, they are not playing at home. The game will be at Minnesota. So you could say maybe this is one of those upset alert games for Michigan, and Minnesota could pull off a shocker. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I'm going to go with Michigan. I just think they're the better team. Then they'll play Iowa on October the 21st. They get a bye week before this game. That's going to give them some help. This is a really tough place to play. Similar teams. I don't think Iowa's a lot better than Minnesota, but I think they might be a little bit better than Minnesota this year. Plus, you've got home field advantage, so everything really points towards Iowa in this game. I'm going to go with the Hawkeyes. So back-to-back losses there for Minnesota. Then they'll play Michigan State on October the 28th at home. Michigan State's a team that also has a lot of question marks with Peyton Thorne transferring out, the quarterback position. I like the defense for Michigan State. I think they're going to be good there. And so this is probably a lower scoring game, but I trust the Minnesota offense a little bit more, plus home field advantage. All of that does go in favor of the Golden Gophers. So going with Minnesota in this game. Then you got Illinois on November the 4th. Another team that could be in the running in the Big Ten West. I think, if Wisconsin does not win this division and kind of run away with it, you've got Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, all these teams that have a real shot in the Big Ten West. And so this could potentially be a really big game. So Illinois is going to want to run the football. It's another similar matchup to the Minnesota-Iowa game. But this time, Minnesota is the team with home field advantage. And I think that's going to be enough. So I think they beat Illinois in a close one, and they get to 6-3. Then they'll play Purdue on the road November 11th. This is an interesting matchup here. Talent-wise, I don't even know really who has the advantage here. Probably a slight advantage for Minnesota. Purdue is a team with a new coaching staff, some new faces. It's a team that I think gets better as the season goes. Probably struggles early in the year, but maybe they're playing some pretty good football by this point. Plus, they have home field advantage. This one's kind of a toss-up for me. Again, I do think Minnesota's probably the better team, but home field advantage makes the difference. Purdue pulls off the upset, and I do think that's the one game where Minnesota does get upset this year. Northwestern potentially could get them as well if you're talking about an upset. But one of those games on the road probably does turn into an upset in my opinion. Then they get Ohio State on the 18th. Talked about the secondary for Minnesota being a problem. Well, you don't want to face Ohio State with a weak secondary. So this is probably going to be their worst loss of the season. Again, you go back to what Minnesota likes to do with PJ Fleck sometimes is they like to run the football, hold the ball, keep the opposing offense off the field. And maybe that works for a little bit here, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make this game close. So Ohio State too explosive. I think the Buckeyes win this game. And then they'll have one more game left here with Wisconsin to close things out. This is going to be a good matchup here. Wisconsin, I think, is the better team, but it's a rivalry. Minnesota's playing at home. We're just going to go ahead and pick Minnesota here to pull off the upset. So I think they beat Wisconsin. If we're going by favorites, I think they're probably a favorite against Purdue and an underdog against Wisconsin, so you could probably flip those games around. But that's not how college football goes. Upsets happen for a variety of different reasons, and I'm just going to say Minnesota's able to pull off a big win there over Wisconsin, their best win of the season, but then they have a tough loss at Purdue. But still getting to 7-5, a good season. Again, some question marks on defense for me. A pretty tough schedule with both Michigan and Ohio State out of the East and North Carolina in the non-conference. I think they're more likely to go 8-4 than 6-6. But again, with a schedule, 6-6, I guess, is possible. And you can see why those over-unders were all the way down at 6.5 or possibly up to 7.5. It's a tough one to predict because a lot of players that don't have a ton of production here for Minnesota, and you're just kind of counting on what they've done to develop these players. And so far, PJ Fleck has done a nice job at doing that. So I think Minnesota's going to be solid at 7-5. Give me your thoughts, your predictions on the Golden Gophers down in the comments below.